So many people walk through life with the constant weight of self-improvement, the never-ending sense that they are incomplete, damaged, or somehow defective. They believe that happiness lies just around the corner, in the next book, the next ritual, the next technique that promises to fix what is wrong with them. But what if the entire premise is false? What if you were never broken to begin with? What if the search for fixing yourself is itself the very thing keeping you from peace? You see, the greatest illusion we live under is the idea that we are fundamentally flawed. And the moment you recognize that this is only an idea, a mental construct, you begin to discover the freedom of simply being as you are. From the earliest years of life, many of us are taught to believe there is something wrong with us, some missing piece that must be found, some flaw that must be corrected before we are worthy of love, respect, or peace. Parents, teachers, institutions, and culture itself often instill in us the belief that we are inadequate, that we are somehow incomplete, and that our purpose is to spend our lives patching ourselves together in search of a perfection that was never lost in the first place. This conditioning seeps in slowly, so subtly that by the time we are adults, we no longer question it. We simply assume it is true. We begin to live as if brokenness is our original state, and the chase to fix ourselves becomes the story of our lives. Yet this story is not reality, it is an illusion. The feeling of being broken does not come from the essence of who you are, but from the layers of expectation, comparison, and judgment placed upon you by others, and then absorbed into your own mind. When you strip away those layers, when you pause long enough to ask, "Who told me I am broken, and why did I believe them?" you begin to sense that the answer is not rooted in truth, but in conditioning. The sense of brokenness is reinforced everywhere you look. Advertisements thrive on convincing you that you are incomplete without their product. Schools often make you feel like your worth is measured by performance, grades, or conformity to a standard that ignores your individuality. Even relationships can become mirrors of inadequacy, where love is offered conditionally, only if you fit a mold, only if you meet expectations. Over time, you begin to weave these external messages into the very fabric of your identity. The phrase, "I am broken," becomes an unspoken belief that governs your actions, your choices, and your emotions. But the truth is, this is nothing more than a story you were handed, a story that obscures the deeper reality that you were never damaged to begin with. What is remarkable is that the illusion of brokenness gains its power only when you do not question it. The moment you turn inward, the moment you sit quietly and observe, you begin to realize that your essential self has never been harmed by any of these stories. Beneath the chatter of the mind, beneath the voices of judgment and comparison, there is a presence that simply is. This presence has no need to be fixed, no desire to be completed, for it is already whole. When you encounter it, even for a brief moment, you understand that the very effort to fix yourself is like polishing the surface of a mirror while forgetting that the mirror already reflects perfectly. This realization does not deny pain, mistakes, or wounds you may have carried. It simply reframes them. Your struggles are part of the human condition, but they do not define your essence. To see through the illusion of brokenness is to step out of the prison that was never locked, to recognize that you were not born into defect, but into wholeness. The task is not to endlessly repair yourself, but to awaken to the truth that you were never broken at all. The more you believe you are broken, the more you are drawn into the trap of constant self-improvement. It becomes an endless cycle where every new method, every new book, every new teaching seems to whisper, "Just fix this, and then you will finally be at peace." Yet peace never arrives, because the very act of striving confirms the hidden belief that you are not enough. Self-improvement can so easily disguise itself as wisdom, but underneath it is often a subtle form of self-rejection. When you tell yourself you need to be better, stronger, happier, calmer, you are, without realizing it, telling yourself that who you are right now is unacceptable. And in that quiet but relentless denial, suffering is born. This trap is seductive. because it feels like progress. Each step on the ladder of self-improvement seems to promise a higher view, a clearer horizon, but the ladder itself is infinite. The harder you climb, the more distant the summit appears. You begin to measure your life by how close you are to some imagined state of perfection, always in the future, never here. In this way, the pursuit of fixing yourself becomes the very thing that keeps you from freedom. It ties you to a cycle of striving where fulfillment is always postponed, always deferred, always someday. The irony is that true transformation does not come from this constant attempt to adjust and polish the self. It comes when you recognize that nothing needs fixing in the first place. Growth happens not because you forced it, but because you stopped fighting yourself. Like a tree, you do not need to strain to grow. You grow naturally when given the right space and conditions. The obsession with self-improvement is like pulling on the branches of a tree, demanding it stretch faster, higher, straighter. In doing so, you may harm what would have flourished if only you had let it be. This does not mean that change is impossible or that you must remain stagnant. Rather, it means that real change comes from acceptance, not resistance. When you embrace yourself as you are, growth becomes effortless, organic, even joyful. When you let go of the idea that you must constantly repair yourself, you free up the energy that was trapped in self-criticism, and that energy becomes available for living. The trap of constant self-improvement blinds you to the reality that you are already whole. The more you chase an idealized version of yourself, the further you drift from the truth of what you are right now. To step out of this trap is to recognize that you do not need to climb a ladder to reach the sky. You are already standing beneath it. The vastness of being has always been here, waiting for you to notice, beyond the endless striving, beyond the illusion that you must first be fixed before you can live. When you live under the weight of the idea that you are broken, you inevitably hand over your power to forces outside yourself. You begin to seek validation in the approval of others, chasing their recognition as if it were proof that you are worth something. You begin to rely on teachers, gurus, systems, and ideologies to give you a sense of identity, mistaking borrowed truths for your own. The subtle danger here is that by believing you are incomplete, you make yourself dependent on the world to complete you, and in doing so, you lose sight of the truth that your wholeness was never missing in the first place. Dependence is not simply about material needs. It becomes emotional, psychological, and even spiritual. When you see yourself as fractured, every compliment feels like medicine, every criticism feels like confirmation of your defect, and your sense of self sways like a fragile reed in the wind. This dependence robs you of freedom. You may feel like you are making choices, but in reality, your choices are driven by the fear of not being enough. You pursue achievements not because you truly desire them, but because they act as shields against the gnawing suspicion of inadequacy. You enter relationships not from a place of wholeness, but with the hope that another person will repair the parts of you that you secretly despise. And because you hand this responsibility to others, you also give them the power to wound you deeply. If they withdraw their love, their approval, their recognition, you collapse, for you had built your sense of self not upon solid ground, but upon their fragile and shifting perception. The tragedy of this dependence is that it is unnecessary. You are never lacking the essence that you seek in others. The love, recognition, and worth you hope to find from them is already within you, quietly waiting beneath the noise of your own doubt. When you search outside of yourself, you are like a traveler circling the globe in search of treasure, unaware that it has always been buried under the very ground on which you stand. The feeling of incompleteness is not solved by adding more from the outside. It dissolves when you turn inward and recognize that nothing was missing to begin with. To see this clearly is to step out of the illusion of brokenness and to reclaim the authority of your own being. You realize that the world can no longer hold you hostage with its rewards and punishments, for you are no longer bargaining for worth. You no longer need to prove yourself, to win approval, or to beg for recognition, because you understand that the essence of who you are does not depend on anyone's opinion. And in that realization, dependence fades away like a shadow that was only ever cast by your own belief. You become free, not because you fixed yourself, but because you saw that you were never broken enough to need fixing at all. The obsession with fixing yourself blinds you to one of life's simplest truths. Growth is not something you manufacture by sheer force of will. It is something that unfolds naturally when resistance is released. A flower does not open because it disciplines itself into blooming. It opens because the conditions allow it to, because there is no resistance to its unfolding. Yet when you carry the belief that you are broken, you place obstacles in your own path. You resist what you are, you fight against your own being, and in that very struggle, you prevent the organic rhythm of growth from doing its quiet work. The paradox is that the harder you try to force yourself into becoming better, the more entangled you become in the illusion of brokenness. This is why so many people chase endless self-improvement programs, rituals, and philosophies yet remain trapped in the same cycles of dissatisfaction. They are not allowing life to flow through them. They are trying to push life into a mold that it was never meant to fit. The more they strive, the tighter they grip, the more they suffocate the possibility of natural transformation. Growth cannot be forced because it is not an achievement. It is an unfolding. It comes not by conquering yourself, but by ceasing to wage war against yourself. The real shift happens when you stop asking, "How can I fix myself?" and instead begin to ask, "What is preventing me from being who I already am?" This change of question reveals the truth, that beneath the layers of self, criticism and doubt lies a natural intelligence that knows how to live, how to grow, how to love. This intelligence does not require your constant interference. It requires your trust. Just as the heart beats without your command, just as your breath flows in and out without your effort, there is a deeper rhythm of the soul that knows how to expand if you will only stop resisting it. This is why acceptance is not passivity. Acceptance is the soil in which transformation takes root. To accept yourself fully is not to say, "I will never change." It is to say, "I am no longer at war with what I am." And when the war ends, energy that was wasted in conflict becomes available for creativity, for love, for presence, for true change. Real transformation does not arrive as a battle won against the self, but as a blossoming that occurs when the self is no longer suffocated by judgment. In this way, growth is not something you achieve, it is something you allow. It is the quiet revolution that happens when you stop strangling life with expectations and let it move through you freely. The illusion of brokenness makes you believe you must climb mountains to be whole. But wholeness is already here, waiting for you to notice, and it reveals itself the moment you surrender the struggle to be anything other than what you are. The more you chase after perfection, the more you are haunted by the feeling of imperfection. This is one of life's great ironies. When you are constantly striving to fix yourself, you magnify the very flaws you are trying to escape. It is like staring at a small crack on a mirror and becoming so obsessed with repairing it that you forget the mirror still reflects the entire image. The pursuit of an ideal self, the flawless version of you who is always confident, always composed, always admirable, becomes a prison. For every step you take toward that image, it seems to move further away, mocking your efforts with its unattainable shine. Perfection is a moving target because it is born from comparison. The mind invents an ideal not out of reality, but out of fragments stolen from culture, from media, from the curated images of others' lives. You are not chasing your true self when you chase perfection. You are chasing a mirage. And what happens when you run after a mirage? You collapse in exhaustion, thirsty and unsatisfied, because you were pursuing something that was never real in the first place. This endless striving creates a cycle of suffering. You begin to measure every action, every decision, every moment of your life against an invisible standard, and the verdict is always the same: not enough. No matter how much you achieve, there is always more to do. No matter how much you grow, there is always further to go. You never arrive because the destination was an illusion. And in this way, perfectionism becomes a form of self-cruelty. It whispers to you, you cannot rest. You cannot be satisfied. You cannot love yourself as you are. It keeps you on a treadmill where effort replaces joy, and where becoming replaces being. The tragedy is that this search for perfection blinds you to the beauty of imperfection. A crooked tree has more character than a perfectly straight pole. A scar tells a story that flawless skin cannot. The things you dismiss as broken or incomplete often carry the deepest meaning. To deny your imperfections is to deny the very texture of your humanity. You become sterile, hollow, a mask trying to pass for a face. Real life, the kind that is raw, messy, unpredictable, is shut out because it does not fit into the narrow box of what you think perfection should be. The moment you stop chasing perfection, something remarkable happens. You begin to see the richness of what already is. You notice the beauty in your flaws, the lessons in your mistakes, the uniqueness in your scars. You realize that imperfection is not an obstacle to love, creativity, or growth. It is the very ground on which they stand. Life was never asking you to be perfect. It was asking you to be alive. And being alive means being unfinished, being inconsistent, being human. The pursuit of perfection is a rejection of life itself, and only by letting go of it can you finally discover the fullness of being. Control is one of the greatest illusions that keeps human beings trapped in unnecessary suffering. We cling to the belief that if only we could master every detail of our lives, our careers, our relationships, our emotions, then we would finally feel safe. Yet the harder we grip, the more life slips through our fingers. To live under the tyranny of control is to live in constant anxiety, for reality does not bend to our will. It moves according to its own rhythm, its own mysterious order, and the attempt to cage it only leaves us exhausted and resentful. Think of water in your hands. If you cup them gently, the water rests there, shimmering and alive. But if you tighten your grip, trying to hold it firmly, it leaks through your fingers until nothing remains. This is the nature of control. The more force you apply, the less you actually possess. Life, like water, is meant to flow. It cannot be hoarded, it cannot be tamed, it cannot be organized into neat little boxes without losing its essence. When you attempt to dominate it, you destroy the very thing you are trying to preserve. Control is seductive because it promises security. It whispers that if you could just manage every possibility, anticipate every danger, prepare for every outcome, then nothing could harm you. But this is a fantasy. No plan survives untouched by the unknown, and no amount of foresight can account for the chaos of existence. The pursuit of absolute control does not protect you from uncertainty. It only deepens your fear of it. You begin to see life not as an adventure to be lived, but as a problem to be solved, and in solving it, you miss the experience itself. The irony is that by letting go of control, you gain something far greater: freedom. When you stop trying to force life into submission, you become attuned to its natural rhythm. You see opportunities not as outcomes to be engineered, but as waves to be ridden. You find strength not in rigidity, but in flexibility, not in resistance, but in surrender. This is not weakness, it is wisdom. A tree that refuses to bend in the storm will break, while one that yields will survive. True mastery of life does not come from controlling it, but from dancing with it. It is a balance of action and acceptance, of effort and surrender. You do what you can, but you do not demand that the universe obey your timetable. You act with intention, but you release the illusion that you can dictate the outcome. In this release, anxiety dissolves and peace takes its place. To let go of control is not to fall into chaos. It is to step into harmony. It is to recognize that life is wiser than your plans, that existence itself carries an intelligence deeper than any human calculation. When you trust this intelligence, you no longer feel the need to strangle life with your grip. You simply open your hands, and in doing so, you discover that everything you sought to control was never lost. It was always here, flowing, waiting for you to finally let it be. The fear of uncertainty is the deepest chain that keeps people from truly living. From childhood, we are taught to seek safety in certainty, to plan for tomorrow, to build walls against the unknown. But in doing so, we imprison ourselves within a narrow corridor of possibilities. We cling to what is familiar not because it is fulfilling, but because it feels predictable, and anything unpredictable is labeled as danger. Yet what we call danger is often just life itself, unfiltered, unshaped by our expectations. The truth is that uncertainty is not the enemy. It is the very essence of existence. Every breath you take is uncertain. You do not know when it will be your last. Every relationship you form carries uncertainty, for you cannot control how long it will last or how deeply it will transform you. Every step you take into the future is a step into the unknown. To fear uncertainty, then, is to fear life itself. It is to reject the very fabric of reality and to live in perpetual resistance to what is. And resistance is the root of suffering. When you fight uncertainty, you bind yourself to anxiety. You spend your days anticipating every possible disaster, rehearsing every potential failure, strategizing against every imagined enemy. But no amount of preparation can banish the unknown. Life will always arrive in ways you did not expect. The more you resist this truth, the more fragile you become. For the smallest disruption can shatter your illusion of control. It is like building a fortress out of glass. It looks solid, but the first stone thrown by chance will destroy it. Yet something extraordinary happens when you stop fearing uncertainty and begin to embrace it. You realize that uncertainty is not chaos, it is possibility. It is the open space where creativity is born, where love takes root, where transformation begins. The most meaningful moments of your life, falling in love, discovering your purpose, creating something new, were never part of a script. They emerged out of the unknown. They were gifts from uncertainty. To shut out the unknown is to shut out life's greatest treasures. To embrace uncertainty is to stand naked before existence and trust its rhythm. It is to walk into the dark not with fear, but with curiosity. It is to recognize that security was never the point, for security is stagnation, and stagnation is death. Life is movement, and movement is only possible in the presence of uncertainty. The river does not fear where it will flow. It simply moves, and in moving, it becomes itself. When you stop fearing uncertainty, everything changes. The walls you built to keep out danger dissolve, and you find that they were also keeping out joy. The future stops being a threat and becomes a horizon. You begin to live not as a prisoner of what might go wrong, but as a participant in what is possible. And in that surrender, in that trust, you discover the freedom that was always waiting for you. Not the freedom from uncertainty, but the freedom through it.